Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Westferry Times. I'm your host. Today, we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really significant issue that's getting a lot of attention. It's about the growing calls for a formal apology from the British royal family, specifically regarding their historical connections, ties to institutions where child abuse sadly occurred. To really get a handle on this, we need to understand the history, the role these crown-linked places played, and crucially, what an apology might actually mean for survivors. And we're very fortunate today. We have an expert guest with us, a distinguished historian with deep knowledge of institutional responsibility and the legacy of the British Empire. Welcome to the discussion.
Thank you. It's a vital topic, really. Glad to be here to talk about it.
Great. So let's start perhaps at the beginning. Where do the roots of this whole controversy lie? What's the fundamental connection we need to grasp?
Well, the core issue stems from the Crown's historical associations with quite a range of institutions. We're talking about boarding schools, juvenile detention centers, various church-run organizations, that sort of thing. And over the years, really disturbing allegations, systemic abuse, have emerged from inside these places. What's key here is that many of them operated under a royal charter or had direct royal patronage.
A royal charter, right. That's a formal grant from the monarch.
Exactly. It gives a special status, privileges sometimes. And this royal link, well, it lent these institutions a huge amount of legitimacy, prestige. Yeah,
So it wasn't necessarily the royals managing them day to day, but more like a powerful endorsement. That carried real weight.
precisely. The patronage, even if it was mostly symbolic operationally, it acted as a strong endorsement. It gave them a kind of perceived stamp of approval, a societal assurance, if you like. And this veneer of trustworthiness, unfortunately, might have inadvertently helped create an environment where abuse could be hidden more easily, where victims' voices weren't heard or perhaps weren't believed for a very long time.
Hmm. And over the last decade or so, we've seen more and more survivors bravely coming forward, sharing just horrific experiences. What are they asking for now, specifically from the monarchy?
The central demand, overwhelmingly for many survivors, is for a clear, formal apology, directly from the royal family. They see it as, well, not just acknowledging wrongdoing, but as a really vital step in validating the suffering they went through, the profound, lasting suffering. An apology from an institution that's so symbolic, so historically significant, it would send a powerful message that what happened was wrong, fundamentally wrong, and that these institutions where they suffered were, in a way, backed by the highest levels of society.
Right, and the response from Buckingham Palace so far, how has that been characterized?
To date, the public response has generally been expressions of sympathy, sympathy for those who've suffered abuse, but there hasn't been that direct, explicit acknowledgement of responsibility relating to specific institutions or events with those clear crown links. And it's that lack of direct acknowledgement of the connection that campaigners and survivors are really pushing to change.
Okay, that brings us to this tricky area of responsibility, doesn't it? Legal versus moral. What's the Crown's legal position in the UK on this?
Legally, the Crown in the UK generally operates under the principle of sovereign immunity. That complicates direct legal challenges in many historical contexts. But when you look at the moral responsibility, the picture changes quite a bit. When places like, say, St. George's School or the Borstal Homes operated under a royal charter, well, that absolutely created a perception. Whether it was intended or not, it looked like Crown approval, or at least not disapproval of how they operated. That historical link carries, I think, significant moral weight, especially now we understand the scale of the abuse.
Are there examples elsewhere, other countries where apologies have happened in similar situations?
Yes, there are several important international precedents people often point to. Canada's one. There have been formal apologies from the government, and involving the monarchy too, regarding the residential school system and the abuse of Indigenous children there. Australia, similarly, issued a national apology back in 2008 for the historical mistreatment of Indigenous peoples, including those in institutions. These apologies, they can't erase the past, but they're widely seen as really necessary steps towards healing, towards reconciliation.
Let's explore that web of connections, the monarchy, the Church of England, the Commonwealth. How does that layer complicate things, or maybe illuminate them?
They're deeply interwoven, absolutely. The monarch is the supreme governor of the Church of England. And the church historically ran many, many schools and other organizations where abuse has been alleged and often proven. Plus, the reach of these royal links, it wasn't just in the UK, it extended to colonial governance across the Commonwealth Canada, Australia, Bermuda, many places. Institutions with royal connections were set up and run in those contexts too. So it's not purely a UK domestic issue.
So the impact, the calls for accountability, they stretch much further.
Definitely. You have survivors across the Commonwealth now adding their voices, demanding recognition, demanding justice for abuse in institutions with those Crown ties. And there's a growing argument that the palace's continued silence on this, well, it could actually damage relationships, especially in Commonwealth countries where people are already debating their future links to the Crown. Silence can look like indifference, disregard for their history.
We have seen a real shift in public feeling about issues like this recently. How much has public awareness, maybe the media, played a role in pushing this specific issue forward?
The shift in public perception has been quite dramatic. Social media, for instance, has given survivors platforms they just didn't have before to connect, to share their stories widely. It's empowered them, amplified their voices collectively. And investigative journalism has been crucial too, digging up difficult truths, publicizing abuses that were, frankly, hidden or ignored for decades. So you see, I think, much less public tolerance now for silence from leaders, from symbolic institutions, when faced with such serious allegations.
It really feels like a kind of cultural reckoning, doesn't it? How we deal with historical wrongs.
It does. It feels like a moment where society is increasingly demanding accountability for past injustices, especially against vulnerable groups. The big question hanging in the air is whether an institution like the monarchy, with all its history and symbolism, will engage with this shift, or will it try to remain above it?
What are the potential downsides for the royal family if they don't issue a formal apology, if they continue to avoid it?
Well, sticking to silence carries real risks for their reputation. It could easily be seen by many as a lack of empathy. Or, more critically, some might interpret it as a kind of implicit complicity with what happened in the past. On the flip side, there's undoubtedly nervousness inside the palace. Worries that a formal apology might open the floodgates, so to speak. Questions about financial reparations, other legal challenges. It's complex.
Is that a realistic concern, that an apology automatically equals legal liability?
Legal teams are usually very careful, crafting apologies to specifically avoid admitting legal liability in precise terms. However, the symbolic power of the monarchy saying, "We are sorry," you can't underestimate that. Regardless of the legal wording, it would carry immense weight publicly. It would certainly be seen as acknowledging a profound moral responsibility.
Based on your understanding, maybe conversations you've had or research you've done, what do survivors most want right now? What are their key goals?
More than anything else, I think, it's genuine acknowledgement. That's the recurring theme. They want their experiences, their pain, which is often lifelong, to be fully seen, validated, especially by institutions like the monarchy that were connected to the places they were harmed. Yes, some are pushing for truth-telling initiatives, finding out the full story, and some are seeking compensation, understandably. But the core desire, the fundamental one, seems to be recognition, acknowledgement at the highest level.
Looking ahead then, what could meaningful change actually look like? What are some realistic steps the Crown might take?
Meaningful responses could take several forms, I suppose. A public formal apology would clearly be a major step, maybe coupled with something like a dedicated day of remembrance for survivors of institutional abuse. Funding could be another concrete action, contributing significantly to support services designed for survivor-specific needs. And some survivors have suggested a royal commission, an independent body, to properly investigate historical institutional abuse linked to the Crown. That could lead to deeper truth-telling, maybe further actions.
And finally, just based on the current climate, the pressure that's building, how likely do you think it is that we'll see significant change on this, say, in our lifetimes?
Given the momentum, the increasing public awareness, and the, frankly, powerful and persistent voices of survivors and advocates, I do think meaningful change is likely. Yes. The strategy of continued silence just seems increasingly unsustainable. It doesn't align with where society seems to be heading on, confronting these difficult histories.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. It's been incredibly valuable.
Thank you. And yes, to all survivors who might be listening, please know your voices are being heard and they really do matter.
And to our listeners, if you've been affected by any of the difficult issues we've discussed today, please know that you are not alone. There are resources out there that can help. Thank you for watching Westferry Times. Until our next deep dive, stay informed, stay aware, and take care.